I trust that everyone is seeing my screen. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Sandy, so I'm a Kui Studios director. We're here today to talk about the Moonshot Sprint, and we hope that you can learn from this occasion and hopefully convince our innovation and startup community to apply. So without going too much into the detail, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Alison, who's going to take us through sorry, before I do that, let me just talk through the agenda first. So what we'll do is about Moonshot Sprint, then I'll speak about how the program actually works, and then we'll move on to the corporate challenges, and then lastly, it would be just the Q&A, joint Q&A with all the corporates. So I'm going to allow my colleague Alison to then take us through about Moonshot. Over to you, Alison.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. And we're excited to tell you a little bit about the Moonshot Sprint. So Kui Studios, in partnership with Growth Impact, which is my consultancy, is bridging the gap between startups and enterprises through a Moonshot Sprint, which is a workshop funded by the US Department of State to enable growth and innovation by connecting startups and enterprises to expand markets and networks. The Moonshot Sprint will encourage solving enterprise business problems and enabling startup pilot projects by co-creating solutions, delivering value at super speed for both parties. The Sprint will be an ecosystem exchange where we'll share content, insights, and knowledge across both the US and South Africa innovation platforms. So a little bit about details about the Moonshot Sprint. So the workshop will be over 2 days. There'll be a day one, which is going to be virtual, and it's going to be for startups only. And that's going to be on November 10th. And that's focused on getting startups enterprise ready to work with the 4 enterprises that we've already selected. We'll go into a little bit more details on another slide about the benefits of that workshop, but that will be a great workshop that will just really help get startups enterprise ready. On day 2, which will be November 11th, that will be held in Johannesburg at Kui Studios. And that is the co-creation day between the enterprises and the startups to facilitate potential partnerships and potentially co-create solutions for pilot projects. We're going to be working with 4 enterprises that we're really excited about, so thank you so much. One will be in the consumer packaged goods space, one will be in the financial services space, one will be in the healthcare space, and one will be in the public sector space. As part of this, we'll be pairing these enterprises with 2 different startups each, so altogether we'll have 8 startups as part of this workshop sprint. The workshop is complimentary to attend because it is sponsored by the US Department of State. In terms of participating startups, they must have at minimum an MVP to attend, product market fit, and some traction in the market. Typically, probably at least in the seed or growth stage startups. Next slide. Our program partners, as we mentioned, US Department of State is sponsoring this program as part of the actual Mandela Washington Fellowship Reciprocal Exchange, which is a flagship program created in 2014 by Barack Obama. As part of this program, a US individual, myself, is able to collaborate with an African fellowship leader, such as Sendiso, for projects to expand networks and for strategic partnerships. My business, Growth Impact, is a consultancy with the mission of accelerating growth for startups in the innovation ecosystem. Services I provide are access to insights, growth and go-to-market strategy, and access to partners in market for global startups, mostly working with seed stage venture-backed startups. Kui Studios, which is Sendiso's consultancy and organization, is an open innovation studio that helps large enterprises move from a strategy refresh to rapidly solving a problem to a tested solution using design thinking methods and emerging technologies. Next slide. So why the Moonshot Sprint? So we're going to have benefits for both the enterprises and participating startups. So for the enterprises, some of the benefits will include an innovation diagnostic to really help the team identify and articulate their business challenges. This is something that we've actually up until now have already completed with the participating enterprises, really so that we can ensure that we are pairing and matching with the correct startups to solve those solutions. They'll be able to access startup solutions from the innovation ecosystem across South Africa and hopefully Africa as well. It's an opportunity to co-create with startups and build on viable features that can better help solving these business challenges for enterprises. And then also an opportunity to just possibly partner in different ways as well. Cross-pollinate learnings and solutions from enterprises and startups and other verticals. Have early involvement in new technologies for business opportunities. And at the end of the day, it's a delayed large financial commitment because you have a de-risk. There's a de-risking aspect because you can partner with a startup for an experiment and a pilot project to see if this solution will be viable. In terms of the benefits for the startups are going to gain market access to potential stakeholders and buyers of their products, such as CMOs, innovation directors, and product professionals, et cetera. They're going to be able to create a framework for engaging with enterprises, and this will be through day one, getting enterprise ready. As part of that day one also, they'll be able to build and adjust their enterprise go-to-market strategy. They'll gain an understanding of how to structure pilot engagements with enterprises, and also they'll gain best practices and learn from other startups as part of this workshop. So we're really excited. Thanks so much, Sandy. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Alison. Okay, so what I'll be covering is basically the mechanics of this program. Zimele will then also just give you guys a quick spin of the platform you'll be using to apply to participate in this program. So what we are doing right now, we're part of in the launching of this program. So launches today, so applications do open today. They will be closing on the 19th of October. So you've got about 4 weeks to start applying to complete your application. And in that time, you're more than welcome to reach out to us on our social media platforms or even by email, ask us further questions and clarification points on this corporate challenge. It's not this is the end of the conversation, but we invite you to ask us further questions to enrich and better your application when you do submit it. And then from the 20th to the 29th, we'll probably get about between 100 to 300 applications, and then from there we'll sift it down and cut it down. So we'll then allocate about 10 startups per corporate to evaluate. The decide of who will participate is not up to Kubi Studios or Growth Impact or US State Gov. It really is up to the corporations. They would select the startup that they think would help them solve their business problem. Would then notify the winners at the end of October, and we then start arranging for the winners to all be in Joburg on the 11th of November. But then prior to that, the 10th of November, as Alison said, there is a design sprint that is online. There might be other startups in that design sprint on the 10th of November, but that will all happen online, and Alison will be conducting that from the US. It will be in South Africa, in Africa friendly time though, to just allow her to also not we have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but rather to wake up at a normal time and then start the session. So just be mindful of that. So 10th and 11th, do block out those days. And that's basically how the program is going to work. So I'm going to allow my colleague Zimele to share his screen and just take you guys through UNoodle. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Hi, everyone. Trust that you guys are well. So I'll be sharing my screen like Sandy said, and I'll just be going through the UNoodle application and what you'll see on your end. I trust that you guys can now see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So what will happen with UNoodle, there's a link that will be sent to you, or if you register as a user on UNoodle, you'll be taken to this screen. So you'll go through the registration process where they'll take your email, name, surname, and other details. And then it will land you up onto the screen when you click onto the Moonshot link. And then you'll obviously click create a new application. Okay, once you've said create a new application, again leads you up to this screen. And then from here, it's the different details about Moonshot. So your startup name, your email address, and then you're going to be telling us more about your company and what problem you're solving. And then provide us with the industry of your company. And then it picks up, like it collects other important information that we will need when we do go through the judging process. And then towards the end here, there are different types of problem statements that speak to the Moonshot event. So you will go to the one that speaks to the problem that you are wanting to solve. If it isn't the problem that you're wanting to solve, then you'll obviously pick none of the above. And then at the end here, you'll find a document which will have all the different types of problem statements that you can actually refer back to when you do need to refer back to that. So yeah, that is UNoodle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zimele. I'm going to allow Pia from CPSI to now present to us.
There we are. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll quickly take you through the concept that we would like to share with you in terms of the design of a virtual multimedia innovation center for the CPSI. In order to explain and to give you an idea of what it is that we want, I'm going to just quickly take you through what we had. In 2010, we developed a walk-in facility for public sector officials to learn and engage on the topic of public sector innovation in a fun and in an interactive manner, and to create a space to collaborate and solve their own service delivery challenges. Just to give you an idea of some of the things that we had that were very cool in 2010, as you enter, public servants from various backgrounds would give you a quick journey as you walk along footsteps, and these would be triggered by the movement of an official, and the and directional speakers will talk to that person as they take a journey into the innovation center. And this was very fun to see and to observe how people then start interacting. Some of the other facilities that we had was by just pointing at a screen, they could do a self-assessment, get a quick diagnostic of where they are, and they could access best practices. And in addition to that, we had some gamification where you can play with a floor projection, but also some serious work. We had a huge touchscreen where teams could come and build their own process mapping and analyze their existing processes and start designing new solutions. So in essence, this is what we had, and it was very cool in 2010. The question is then, how do we bring this into 2021, 22? My colleague Muzi, I think, is having some challenges in terms of just a quick demo of how we had business processes. I'll take you to the last slide. And if he is ready, then we'll just come back. So what is it that we want? We would like to see a virtual center. Let's call it Virtual Center 2.0, not just a revamp of our old content, not just a web page, but a space, a virtual space where individuals and teams can step into, in an interactive virtual way, into an immersive environment where public servants can engage with innovation in 2022 and beyond. Obviously, this needs to be online, but also accessible through mobile devices. And we would like to use this when we do go out to exhibitions, let's say for use as a touch screen and so on. So the first phase would basically be the concept and design, with an indication of the kind of tools and technology that you would like to use. This is the challenge that we want to pose to you. And some of these elements would be, what's the journey that you want to take people through? in terms of an innovations experience? What would, for example, be the virtual layout? What are the kind of stories, the storyboarding that you want to do, the content and how to present that? What are the kind of experiences that you want someone to have that wow effect on a person in a way that's engaging, that's immersive, so that at the end of this, a public servant can say, yes, the public service can be innovative, the public service can be trend setting, and they can solve real problems. And how do we then facilitate processes through this? If you look at the previous screens, you'll see, and my apology, I never went to presentation mode, but if you look at the previous screens, you will see my colleague Gatliso being central in this process in guiding public servants and making sure that they understand what they do. How do we do this virtually going forward? I don't think Muzi has joined, so Sandiso, I think let's pause there and take it further during Q&A. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Pierre. If you have any questions, please hold them back, and then we'll ask them in the Q&A. I'm going to allow Nakara to now present from Life Healthcare.
Thanks, Sandiso. Can everyone see my screen? Can you see it, Sandiso?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So to contextualize our business, because I think not everyone might be familiar with what we do or might be familiar with one arm of the business. We are a healthcare group with operations in South Africa and internationally in Western Europe, and expanding into the US and other markets. And essentially our main business, 70% of our revenue is in hospitals or kind of what we call acute facilities. So your typical kind of patient comes in when they have a once-off episodic need for healthcare. Now, and we have an expanding business of what we call complementary or chronic disease management. So you think of your kidney disease, renal dialysis, oncology, medical rehabilitation after surgery, as well as mental health. And as I mentioned, of course, the international business is comprised of a diagnostic imaging and molecular imaging business, one of the leading ones in Western Europe, and a radiopharmacy business that supplies essentially the inputs for radiologists to conduct and radiographers to conduct molecular imaging of, for example, cancer, PET-CT scans, and to diagnose diseases. So the reason why I kind of contextualized what we do is the list of problem statements that I have are quite broad. So I've tried to go big in terms of putting a big, hairy, audacious problem statement out there, but then giving examples of specific use cases, technologies, and kind of profiles or parts of the business that we would want to serve for each of these 5 statements. So going kind of from the top of the list down, in our hospitals, kind of the key thing for most hospital groups around the world is maintaining margins. There's extreme pressure on healthcare costs in terms of rising cost of healthcare and inflation. And there's from a revenue and kind of top line perspective, there's not a corresponding growth in terms of pricing and in terms of sort of the insured population, because we operate in the private healthcare space. So for us in the in-hospital space, we're really constrained in terms of the economics, and it's key to either maintain volume, so acquire patients, or retain more of our patients within our system in order to sustain profitability. So kind of the key thing for the hospital acute business in South Africa, the problem statement is how do we improve our patient retention and build more of a kind of, call it electronic patient database, so we can better understand our patients, their health needs, what matters to them in terms of experience. And in terms of kind of specific examples, but please don't be constrained by these examples. What we'd look for is a portal for patients to pre-admit themselves before going into hospital, so sending in their medical information so we can start to build a record, and kind of managing the admin of day-to-day healthcare more efficiently. So appointment bookings, billing and claims management, and customer support. So moving on to the kind of next line, which really talks to what we call a healthcare continuum, which is one of the trends in healthcare around moving away from simply taking patients into our systems, treating them, and then letting them go their way and not sort of actively managing their health. We would like to find ways to support more proactive management and intervention of patients' health earlier in the journey, so that we can kind of catch warning signs in terms of vitals and improve readmissions rates, mortality rates, and that has benefits, of course, for the patients in terms of better health outcomes, but also for our ability to obviously attract more patients, position ourselves as a superior healthcare provider, and be more attractive to the medical aid and insurance population that would obviously want to contract with providers that offer kind of better health outcomes for lower cost due to more proactive intervention. So a very common use case on this topic is remote monitoring of patients' vital signs and being able to flag interventions quickly to the clinical team. And then on that topic, in terms of clinical team, another trend in healthcare, again, moving away from very episodic patient management to a more holistic view of the patient and more collaboration on a patient's holistic healthcare journey. How do we foster greater collaboration amongst the clinical team, so the general practitioners, the specialists, other healthcare providers, to both give them real-time analytics and insights into how the patient's doing and any kind of actions required, and enable everyone to have sort of a single view of this patient to be able to treat them more effectively and interoperably. Moving on to the international side, as I mentioned, we have a molecular imaging business with a radiopharmacy arm that operates in select regions in Europe. And the challenge statement there is, how do we make our molecular imaging supply chain more reliable and cost effective? There's a very short half-life between the radiopharmacy providing these isotopes into a facility to conduct scans. How do we make sure we're better monitoring these shipments to ensure we're maximizing the half-life and being able to better forecast supply and demand and ensure better reliability across the value chain? And then lastly, I guess this is more of a generic use case because it's not kind of specific to healthcare, but in terms of our group support functions, something we really want to explore is how do we introduce more accuracy, efficiency, and insight generation into our manual kind of processes and systems. So an obvious one is financial reporting. So something like robotic process automation would be of interest of us in the shared services space. So that's our kind of brief. I will take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nakara, for that. Thank you so much. I'm going to now allow Mohammed, Mr. Gauss from Tiger Brand. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, Mohammed.
You have, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm assuming my screen is visible.
Yes, we can see your screen, sir.
Perfect. Hi.
Good
So good afternoon.
Yeah, awesome.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really an honor and a privilege to be a part of this program. And it's really one of those exciting challenges. So looking forward to further engagements with you. Just by way of introduction, I'm Mohammed Gauss. I'm the CIO of Tiger Brand. In fact, I just joined Tiger Brands at the beginning of this year. But just for context, to those that may not be totally familiar with Tiger Brands, Tiger Brands is one of the largest manufacturing and marketing companies for fast-moving consumer goods in Southern Africa. And it has a range of brands, and sometimes I even have to look this up because I'm not totally familiar with all of them. So these will be old favorites like Koo, Fatties and Monies, Jungle Oats, All Gold, Purity, Oros, Ingram's, Doom, Castic Rice, Albany Bread. There's a whole host of them. So you name it. I mean, Tiger has a brand in it, and it's usually at the top of its segment. What I'm going to be describing today are actually three innovation briefs. And I'll go through them very quickly, and obviously then the Q&A and further engagements allow us to go into a much more detail. A little bit of a context to this. So the first one relates to what we call smart pricing and revenue growth management. With COVID, with the tougher economic circumstances that we've all been facing, what we're finding is consumers are buying down. So they're buying less of they're buying less categories, and they're buying less of certain categories. So although the actual revenue in the market is sort of stabilized, what people and consumers are buying is less. The challenge that we face, as do all other companies face, how to get more share of the consumer's wallet and how to make that share more profitable. So the real thing that we're challenging for is how do we balance some of those variables and the levers that we have available to be able to drive that revenue, drive the profitability, and drive that growth while maintaining market share. So the key problem statement, and all my slides will have the same sort of, just the market context, what Tiger is doing. But the area of focus is what's the problem that we're trying to solve for. So the first challenge is around how can we leverage data and information that's available there. And this is in-store till data. So we can see everything that consumers buy, including our competitors' products. How could we leverage that information to then come up with the optimum mix of price architecture or product architecture, package sizing, and pricing decisions around that? And as you know, pricing will be based on a revenue, on a volume and a value thing. So you can increase volume by decreasing price, but there's an optimum balancing point where profitability can be driven to its maximum. There are further things like penetration. Do we target a product at existing consumers or the existing buyers of that product, or do we to encourage them to up buy, or do we target a completely new segment of the market? What is the intensity that we go into the market with, etc.? These are all variables that are available to us. And this is one of the key challenges for the retail sector. So, what we're really looking for is somebody to come up with some, innovative algorithms and using the data to be able to then come up with, you can run a promotion of X kind with this product, measure the value of that, see what impact it has, and use that as almost a self-learning platform to be able to drive and optimize our product mix, the pricing associated with that, and how do we really reach into the market and ensure greater success around that. Continuously measuring the impact and the effectiveness of what we're doing from a pricing point of view, from a product architecture point of view, etc. So that's the first challenge. Having all the data available, using that to then be able to help us optimize what we reach out to in the market and how we reach out, what price points, etc. The second challenge deals with earlier this year, we had a product recall. Some of you may have been aware of this, where we had to recall a number of cans. What had happened is the batch of cans that we received from the manufacturer, a few of the cans we detected a problem with the seal, which had the potential to allow contaminants to get into the product. What we then had to do is, these were very, very few of the cans that were impacted that way. But what we didn't have is the ability to be able to see which ones of the finished products were made out of those cans. And if we had that ability to be able to do that, we could then recall or isolate it just to those impacted cans. Without having that, and taking a much more conservative approach, we ended up recalling all the batches all the pallets that were packed with the cans that came from that manufacturer with those batches. Well, the end result was that we ended up destroying or recalling far more than what we needed to do. The ideal here would be to have some kind of a smart tracking or tracing solution that would then be able to individually track products, whether it's through packaging or some other mechanisms, so that if we do have a problem with a specific batch, you can almost isolate it to the problematic items rather than generalize it to the entire batch, the entire warehouse content, or entire shipments that occur across the batch. So the idea here is to be able to have that traceability so that if for whatever reason, those products have to be identified in terms of where they are, or there has to be a recall or some other investigation or analysis on that has to be done. We can almost go down to the SKU level in terms of being able to track and trace that. Then the last one deals with what we're calling third-party 2.0. We deal with a lot of third parties, and we procure ingredients and we use suppliers. As I mentioned, we use cans for the previous example, but there are many, many other ingredients and supplies that we get from various suppliers. We are constantly out in the market evaluating new suppliers, understanding how they stack up against our existing suppliers, understanding the capabilities that they have. If they then match our requirements in terms of capabilities, we then take it to the next level in terms of being able to sign an NDA with them. We then go into the third stage step, which would be in terms of assessing the quality of their products. And if they meet our quality standards, now all of this requires information exchange back and forth. A lot of it can be documentation and other information that is sought. And it's a very tedious and a manual process. Once we then select a supplier, we then provide them with a brief to provide us with certain suppliers or certain products or certain ingredients. And that process of providing the brief into the market is usually done, the ideal for us would be to do it almost on a tender platform. So literally it would be a live real-time tender platform where suppliers that qualify for that will be able to tender for that, give us the pricing. We can make the award directly on the platform and then literally, take that to the next level in terms of contracting with that supplier, providing them with the details, quantities, pricing, location, where the delivery has to happen, etc. But the intent here is to try and streamline and automate as much of this process as we possibly can. As I mentioned, very manually intensive from the start, where we literally engage with potential suppliers, assess them, collect information about them, exchange information and documents with them, then getting to the point once they're on our supplier list in terms of being able to award them or have them bid for work or tender for work for us to be able to award that work and contract for the work that has been awarded. So really the problem here is there's multiple steps that I've highlighted. We can look at automating or streamlining any one of the steps. The ideal would be the end-to-end for us. So that would be the third problem statement that we have. So that in a nutshell are the three problem statements that we have from our perspective. And as with the previous speakers, I'll end it at that point and handle any questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Everyone, we want to just apologize on behalf of Old Mutual who are unable to make the call. We will definitely share their content at a later stage. I'm going to now just start the Q&A if that's okay. So there's already a question for you, Mohammed. So there's a question about how is Tiger Brands currently accessing point of sale product and price data and pricing data on so that's the question. So how is Tiger Brands currently accessing point of sale product and pricing data? That's the question for you.
Okay, thanks for the question. So we have the data already. We get regular feeds, we get daily feeds. There are organizations that actually collate this data and we get it. The problem is once we have that data, we really process it using Excel, very, very complex Excel models. It's not real time. So the analysis that we are able to do is not in real time. We are not able to do a lot of the kind of multitude of scenario planning, doing the what if analysis, doing any kind of modeling on that. So whatever we do in Excel is already way after the fact. It's too late for us to be able to react or quickly enough to the market, and hence there's a huge time lag and a time delay. So the data is available, the access to the data is available. What we're lacking is the ability to process that in real time and give us more insight and intelligence into that. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I'm going to allow another question from the floor. Who will ultimately own the IP? I can also answer that question, and then I'd also invite all the corporates to just answer. Actually, I'll allow them to go first, maybe. So Mohammed, you can go first because you're already on screen, and then allow Nikara, and then Pia to do it next.
Look, I think that's something that will be up for discussion. Typically, I mean, I've worked as a consultant before I was a CIO. So what normally consultants do, it's either jointly owned IP, or typically when you work for a client, the client owns the IP because you get paid for the piece of work that's done. But having said that, if we can come up with some kind of innovation that could be marketed broadly, I would be open to the possibility of joint ownership and joint benefit, joint realization.
Nikara?
I would echo what Mohammed has said. So it would be up for negotiation. I think we'd have to discuss the commercial terms and kind of any sort of sharing of IP or any licensing that needs to be done.
All right, thank you. And then I'm going to allow Pia.
I think the same from our side. It will depend on the effort that will go in from our side and from the innovator side. We have a little additional element in that is if it's publicly funded, there's legislation that governs the IP as well. But we'll make sure that we put that into an initial contract so that everyone is clear from the start. But there won't be any effort to try and wrestle IP out of the innovators, because that would go against the spirit of what we're trying to do, and that is to develop small and medium enterprises. And IP is an important aspect thereof. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And there's another question for Tiger Brands. Does Tiger Brands have a data management system, or are they looking to build and modular system customize their business operations? Also, what kind of insights are they looking to gain from these data management systems?
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that question. So we do have a data management system. We've got large data warehouses, and we've got a multitude of data sources that we analyze. For this specific problem that I've highlighted, we'll probably look at utilizing a subset of that data. It might be a system that would be developed and contained in its own right. And the kinds of insights that we're trying to drive deal with, what happens to volume, and when we change the price by X amount, what happens to the volume of product that we sell? When we run a certain kind of a promotion, a 2-for-1, does the increase in volume compensate for the loss in value, etc.? So really trying to optimize the levers that we can play to increase the profitability of these specific products that are out on retail shelves. This is a subset of the data that we have and a subset of the kind of analysis that we are trying to do. There are many other kinds of scenarios that we plan for. This is specifically looking at items on shop shelves, in supermarket shelves, etc., and how to balance, how to increase the volume and the value and the revenue share that we get from the sales that we achieve. I hope that makes it clearer.
All right, thanks. There's a question from the floor as well, asking about prototyping. Is there a budget, a specific budget for testing and prototyping after the co-creation sessions available? And allow Nikara, you can go first.
So the way it will work for us in Life Healthcare is once we have a kind of proposition from a startup that we feel is adequate to take for approval to our executive committees, we will do that and ask for the right budget to allocate that. So the answer is yes, but it would need to be approved by our governance structures.
Thank you. Pia?
Same here. We'll set aside a separate budget if we're satisfied with the concept and the design. We'll take that as a second phase.
Thank you. And then yourself, Mr. Mohammed?
Exactly the same as Nicara and Pierre. We'd follow exactly the same mechanism.
All right. There's a question, another question about there was a news report, this is for you, Mohammed. There was a news report launching 100 million Rand VC fund. Is that still underway and is an opportunity to apply for funding there?
So the answer to the first part of that is yes. The second part is there is a process in terms of being able to pitch. The idea is to encourage growth of small and medium enterprises, empowerment funding, etc. And those value propositions don't only have to be limited to something that Tiger would benefit from. So the short answer to that is yes, that funding is there, it's still available, and there is a process to be able to tap into that.
All right, okay, thank you so much. Is there any other questions on the floor? If not, okay, it looks like there's none. Alison, would you like to add anything?
I think I'm good. Does anyone have any questions with regards to the program format or any questions on day one or further questions on day two? Okay, it doesn't seem like it. Yeah, we'll be also, for all those attending, if there are startups on this call or ecosystem partners, we'd love your help also in facilitating and sourcing startups in South Africa and also possibly in Africa for this exercise. Would be great to partner together. We will have the UNoodle application as well, but if there's an opportunity to forward that link to your network for those to apply, that would be great. And we also can possibly consider some US startups too, but based on logistics in a hybrid format and the time at which the workshop will be taking place, it might be a little bit difficult. So we can also possibly make introductions later on as well. I think that's it. Let's see, I think Pierre had a note in the chat.
Do you want to explain your note, Pierre? Because I don't quite understand it.
Thanks. I've rushed through the presentation in terms of what we had, also content-wise. I see Muzi was able to join us now in the meeting. We are happy to share some of our old content with those interested. I think the easiest would be through yourself, Sandiso, but we're happy to engage after this and share that content and demonstrate it to those that are interested. I hope that is clear enough. Thanks.
Thank you. So what we will do, we'll post the presentations that you saw today on the UNoodle platform, so they'll be available for you there. And then we can also just link it up with your demos as well, if they are available for people to consume at their own leisure time. So that'll be available all on the UNoodle platform. Inviting you to also go, we'll share links to learn more about the program on Growth Impact website and also Kui Studios website. You can go learn more about the program. US state government runs thousands of programs. Please do not contact them. They will not be able to help you. We are the people to contact, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Thank you so much for joining this call. We really, really appreciate you giving your precious time, and I've just afforded you 13 minutes back into your calendar. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.